Hi there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. If you watched my last fat quarter video, you saw that I made a little mistake and I decided to go with a different easy fat quarter quilt. So today I'm going to show you what I meant to do the correct way. Here's a little demonstration of what I tried to do and why it didn't work. I put two pieces of fabric right sides together. I drew a little line from opposite corners to opposite corners. I stitched a 1/4 inch on each side of the line. This method works great with a square, but it does not work with a rectangle. And here's why. When you open up that seam, you get this weird kite shape. If that's what you're wanting, a kite shape, that's great, but I was trying to get pieces of rectangle that would fit together. Well, let's talk about fat quarters. I've got most of these on sale for less than $1 each. Some of them were like 80 cents, I am not kidding, but they're irresistible to buy at that price. The problem comes in trying to get them used and out of your stash. Before starting to work with these fat quarters, I did press the major creases. I want to have rectangles that measure 8.5 by 10 inches. So what I'm doing is folding my fat quarter over in half one way, and then I fold it in half the other way, and I cut out 4 rectangles all at once. Now for the cutting, I'm simply taking a couple of light rectangles, a couple of dark rectangles, and I'm cutting them diagonally across. So I have to make that cut in advance, and then I'm going to be matching up 2 different shaped triangles and put them back together again. Since I folded my fabric, I've got some of my dark triangles here that are right side up and some that are wrong side up. So I want to make sure and get the right size triangles together, darks and lights matching opposite shaped triangles. Some of the white fabric that I used is either side works. There's no right and wrong side, so that was easy. Some of my light fabric does have a right and a wrong side, so I had to pay attention to right side up. I continued matching up my lights and my darks with opposite shaped triangles. So I'm going to stitch them back together, a light together with a dark, and when I press that seam, it'll make the rectangle that I wanted to make. Now it's time to chain piece these triangles together to make rectangles. And since these cuts are pretty much identical in length, I'm just matching up corner to corner. After I stitched them all together, I separated my chains, and then I separated these triangle stacks into just different piles based on the shape. Now it's time to trim and press these rectangles. After I pressed them all, I did a little counting to see how my layout would work out, and I decided it was going to be 7 across and 8 down. My advice, if you try this quilt, have an even number both ways, either 8 by 10 or 6 by 8. It really didn't work out. I had extra of one kind of triangle. So trimming these rectangles, one thing I wanted to note that's different about trimming a half square triangle, you cannot use that diagonal line on your ruler unless it's the exact angle that you need. My ruler is a 45-degree angle. Well, this angle on a rectangle is not going to be 45 degrees. I'm going to trim my rectangles to 8 inches by 9.5 inches. So what I'm looking for is to line up my point on the seam line where I want my measurement. So you can see 9.5 inches is a line. There's 9.25, there's 9.5. I'm going to line up that 9.5 so it's right on my seam. Then I'm going to that opposite side of the seam and I'm going to get that 8-inch lined up. Next, I take a look all the way around my 8 by 9.5 inch rectangle. Make sure that the 8 and 9.5 inch lines are overlapping, or the fabric is overlapping those lines. If it's off a little bit, you can adjust it, but then the corners won't be exact. And that's okay. Don't worry about it. And here's an example. I tried to line up at 8 inches and 9.5 inches. Now, I did this one the opposite way, and you can see that corner doesn't match up on one of the corners. That's okay. It's going to look fine overall in the quilt. Okay, let's talk about layout. I counted up my blue, my green, my light blue blocks and put them into my quilt in this 7-row or 7-block wide layout. And because I did it that way, I had several rectangles that did not have a match. So you will see what I did in the finished quilt. I had to make one row at the bottom that was kind of a mismatch. I spent some time laying out the dark row, then the green row, then the light blue row, and then the mixed row. Once I got all the rows together, I did put clips in them so I could keep rows together. Then I simply sat down at the machine and started sewing together one row at a time. Because each row is aligned a little bit differently, that is the main reason I did one row at a time. Sometimes I will chain piece multiple rows, but in this project I thought I need to just do one row at a time. Now I have that oddball row that does not match with the chevron row above it. So I decided to pull out some 2.5 inch strips from my stash and make a sashing strip to divide that weird row from the rest of the quilt top. I also pulled out some loose 2.5 inch strips that didn't match anything, and they were holiday themed, Christmas themed, and I used those to go around the quilt as a border as many times as I could, which ended up being 2 complete trips around the quilt top. Next, I put all the rows together. You can see I'm nesting the seams as I go along. I would recommend laying these rows out on the floor or on your design wall and taking them two at a time and then putting them back where you got them to make sure everything stays lined up in this chevron pattern. Once that main part of the quilt top was complete, I started adding my borders. When I got to the end of one side, I flipped the quilt to the next side, finger pressed that border back, and then just started on the next side adding a border. And I did have enough of this long 2.5-inch strip to go around this quilt top 2 times. Using up all these odds and ends really did help me decrease my stash. I just had a few left over of the 2.5-inch Christmas strips, not too much to put in my scrap bin. Here's a look at this mismatched fat quarter chevron quilt with a mismatched border. I kind of like it. I like that it's mixed up. If you like a more cohesive look, that would be easy to do. Just pick your light, pick your dark. Make sure and use an even number of blocks across and an even number of blocks down, and you won't have the mismatching problems that I had. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.